Welcome to the open annual meeting of the Finnish Institute at Athens. This evening, we are delighted to give our annual in this historic building and the beautiful hall of the Academy of Athens, the same building and nearly the same space where the Finnish Institute's inauguration ceremony took place almost 40 years ago. Our warmest thanks go to the Academy for opening its doors to us and for their kind hospitality. Κυρίες και κύριοι, αγαπητοί φίλοι, καλώς ήρθατε στην ετήσια συνάντηση του Φιλανδικού Ινστιτούτου Αθηνών. Απόψε έχουμε την χαρά να βρισκόμαστε σε αυτό το ιστορικό κτίριο, στην καλέσθητη αιθούσα της Ακαδημίας Αθηνών, στον ίδιο χώρο όπου πραγματοποιήθηκαν τα εγγένεια του Φιλανδικού Ινστιτούτου πριν από σχεδόν 40 χρόνια. Οι θερμότερες ευχαριστίες μας απευθύνονται στην Ακαδημία Αθηνών για την ελληνική φιλοξενία. Αρχικά, πριν ξεκινήσω με το πρόγραμμα, θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω θερμά το Υπουργείο Πολιτισμού και τις Εφορίες Αρχαιοτήτων για την αγαστή συνεργασία, όχι μόνο κατά τον τελευταίο χρόνο, αλλά για τα 40 χρόνια της λειτουργίας του Ινστιτούτου μας. This annual meeting is special for us. The Finnish Institute was established 40 years ago when the first board meeting took place in the spring. The first director, Pakkanen, started his activities and the Institute was officially registered in the following September. We are grateful for the Academy because the space is not only historical and meaningful in Greece, but it also stands out as an important marker in the Finnish Institute's own journey. Along this journey, the Institute has grown from modest beginnings, run at the premises of an apartment flat in Pukalki for quite some time in the beginning, to an established archaeological school in Greece. However, instead of looking back to our history this evening, I wish to turn the celebration of our round figure into looking towards the future as well. Let us try to integrate the past to the future perspectives and learn from the successes as well as hardships we have experienced over the years. We are honored to have Professor Paschalis Kitromelides, the long-standing member of Academy of Athens and the Professor Emeritus of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, to address us first. Yes, Professor Kitromelides.
Thank you, Petra. Ambassador of Finland, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and great honor for me to welcome you tonight on behalf of the Academy of Athens and to offer our congratulations on the 40th anniversary of the foundation of the Finnish Institute and our greetings and best wishes for the future 40 years and many more years to come. I don't want to take too much time of tonight's meeting because we have interesting lectures to hear, but I just wanted to put on record tonight in this audience and in this environment my great admiration for Finland. We are the southern nation in Europe and you are the northern nation, but in a paradoxical way, our histories have many parallels, especially the determination of the people to survive. And I think Finland has done very well in fighting its struggles of national survival, in building itself up as a modern European state, and in handling the issues of a multicultural society. It is, I think, a model for all of Europe, and the foundation of the Institute back in 1988 1944, a period of which I have a very positive recollection of how all of this was organized and established. It's an indication, I think, of an understanding of a common European civilization we all share. And the fact that Finland has set up an institute for the study of classical and post-classical antiquity in Athens is an indication exactly of the shared European identity, which I think is the strength of all of us. For all these reasons, I am very happy to celebrate tonight the 40th anniversary. Congratulations.
We have had very friendly collaboration with the Embassy of Finland in Athens. And we have worked together for various engagements over the years, right from the beginning, when the Institute was established and inaugurated, and naturally also over the last year and the last few years. So now I welcome His Excellency the Ambassador of Finland to Greece and Albania, Jari Gustafsson, to address us next.
Professor, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to address you tonight as we celebrate the 4 decades of the Finnish Institute in Athens. During these decades, the collaboration and cooperation between the Institute and the Embassy have been fruitful and based on meaningful dialogue. Many aspects of the Finnish Institute's work, such as translating Finnish literature for Greek readers, have directly supported the Embassy. Those familiar with the Institute's work know the significant role the head of the Institute plays. Over the years, several memorable scholars have left a lasting legacy and impact on the research and archaeological study that Finland has conducted here in Greece. We are privileged to have had so many academically accomplished institute directors here. The work has greatly impacted research on ancient Greece and archaeology in the Eastern Mediterranean. Together with our institutes in the Near East and Rome, they have provided a comprehensive outlook on the area. I would like to emphasize the role of the current head of the Institute, Dr. Petra Pakkanen. She has in many ways deepened the relationship between the Finnish Embassy and the Institute. She has tirelessly worked to broaden the Institute's role and has been open to many discussions on the situations and developments here in the Mediterranean today. The collaboration between the Finnish Embassy and the Institute is not only an effort that the Finnish Institute has. All Nordic institutes in Athens have had very productive collaboration over the years. The most visible proof of this is the Nordic Library here in Athens, which contains an incomparable and growing collection of research material for scholars and researchers. The Finnish Institute in Athens has also done incredibly important work by bringing several generations of university students from Finland to participate in an intensive introductory course on the culture of classical Greece. This has offered French students an important understanding of our common European heritage. So, ladies and gentlemen, lastly, the work of the Finnish Institute continues to increase in importance. Unfortunately, the universities in Finland are directing their focus towards other sectors. Therefore, the Finnish Institute in Athens has an even bigger role in continuing to research and spread information on the culture of both ancient and modern Greece to the Finnish people. So with these words, I would like to congratulate and thank the Institute for its work and wish it the best of success in the coming decades. Thank you.
Thank you for all your very fine, beautiful words. Now I have a rather surprise to you. A surprise is by me, Jari. It's not marked on your program, but will be a short prelude to our annual report and main talk by Mika Kajava to close it. Namely, I was contacted some while ago by an excellent pianist who told me that he had noticed that the Institute's 40th annual will be run at the Eastern Hall of the Academy. He noted that the grand piano there is excellent. And now, Reima, Raijas, a true lover of Greece who has had a long career as performing and teaching pianist both in Greece and in Finland, and to whom the Finnish Institute was a very dear place when he lived in Athens for many years in the 1990s, he will come play that piano for us and for you. Let the music and Sibelius to piano miniatures, we could say, uusi, the Spruce, and Valse, performed by Reima, Raijas, prepare us now for the next phase of this evening's circle contact. The Finnish Institute at the moment very grateful for all of you and for Reima, but we are also very grateful for a huge number of people and institutions who have made our work possible, who have helped and supported us over the past year. As it is impossible to name everyone individually here, I trust you believe me that my heartfelt thanks go to all the scholarly institutions in Greece, in Finland and elsewhere, and to many fantastic individuals, colleagues and friends we have had pleasure to work with. Nevertheless, there's always a but, isn't there? I take this opportunity to signal out one special group of people, namely the so-called support delegation of the Finnish Institute, tukidelegaatio in Finnish, which, with their generous financial sponsorship, has made our archaeological work possible over the last years. Their central figure, Joni Hartel, who gathered together the delegation some 20 years ago and tirelessly coordinated its valuable work with exemplary enthusiasm, passed away February this year. I dedicate this lecture to his memory. The following report now covers the period which runs from May 2023 to today. During this report period, as a result of previous, still recent changes in the structure of Institute's personnel setup, we have now a great ensemble of people working for us. And I simply want to express my warmest thanks to all of you. Last year, we also said grateful goodbyes to our previous assistant director and welcomed his successor. I wish to mention here also our fantastic and diligent and hard-working interns who actually run important operations at the Institute and who embody the future with their new skills and have brought young, energetic elements into the life of an institute and with their look towards the future and towards the times to come. Last year we had altogether 9 interns working with us in the office and in the field. You can imagine how much this lovely young lot have done for the benefit of our institute. Then the Nordic Library, that marvelous institution which is run jointly by the 4 Nordic countries. I have acted as the head of the governing board of the library and worked with my wonderful Nordic fellow directors for the 2nd year running. And this has opened my eyes, has provided with an eye-opening experience to see how the Nordic cooperation at its best. It's not only words, but can also be functioning daily entity and practice. And very mutual and warm mutual support. Patrik Talatas became the head librarian at the turn of this year, and Antti Lampinen started as the senior academic librarian. Thank you, both of you. Next year will, by the way, mark 30 years of the library, a year certainly worth celebrating. And we have plans, just wait and see. Now I turn to activities and briefly present examples of our activities starting from scholarly activities and events. Examples of our program of events includes the following workshops and seminars organized by us alone or together with other institutions in Athens, in Finland and Greece, in Italy, in Sweden, Netherlands, Lebanon, and so on. In our workshops and lectures, we investigated, for example, the history, cultural, and political and social connections of Odessa, with Greek influences from its very early history to the recent times. We delved into the concept and representations of ugliness in the cultural and political discourses of ancient Greece. We facilitated an evening for the news and recent developments of the bronze statues from the Raijas. We learned about the city design and town plans. Thank you, Professor Pakkanen, here with us this evening. And very recently, last week in fact, We organized together with our Danish and Dutch colleagues a 3-day international conference entitled Constant Participant, Creating and Affirming Identities Through Material Culture in Ancient Greek Sanctuaries and Modern Museums, which gathered to Athens 37 presenters internationally. I'm still elated about my co-organizers for their warm, friendly and efficient work on this event that we certainly are still very positively recovering from. I wish to single out here one event because the interest it generated is very meaningful for us. Namely, the third public event organized together with the Affiliate of Antiquities of Theotida and Evrythania and the municipality of Domokos in November to present to the local community the results of the season's work of Mediteia archaeological program. It was, again, heartwarmingly well received by the local people. And this assured us about welcoming attitude and warmth of the people towards our archaeological work in the region. Various topics have been researched under the auspices of the Institute and within its research programs. They span from ancient Greek leather production methods and practices, concept of sacrality relating to ancient Greek sanctuaries, seafaring and mobility in ancient Mediterranean area, possible pantheistic traits in ancient Greek religion, formation of isms in ancient Greece, early modern and contemporary European history from perspective of small states in the Nordic and the Mediterranean regions under the program called Normet, to the scholarly biography of Holger Teslev, Herms in Classical Attica, epigraphical studies of Melitene inscriptions, and so on. In the publishing front, our electronic publication series Grifos saw its second volume coming out, and the third is now being in the layout phase, coming out very soon. Leena Pietilä-Castrén in the volume 2 explores the Finnish history of antiquities collecting and publishes the collections of antiquities in Finland that the academics and collectors gathered over the course of the 20th century. While Robin Rönnlund takes an interesting look at the Melitean archaeology and history in the volume 3. Björn Forsén and Antti Lampinen edited a volume, Oriental Mirage, Stereotypes and Identity Creation in the Ancient World, based on a symposium held earlier at the Institute, and this one was published as well very recently. Education and teaching. Institute's traditional introductory course to ancient Greece for BA-level students had, under the skillful guidance of Antti Lampinen, once again an intense program which took, as a novelty, the students for the first time to Albania. Not only, but this was the new addition. What I can say, Antti, and I want to say also on behalf of many impressed students, that you truly have impressed so many of them. We should also almost say that you've enchanted the students into the ancient Greece for over the years that you worked for us at the Institute. Further education of teachers has proved to be an important part of our teaching program. You see that on the right, on the slide. Last summer, we had the pleasure to provide Latin teachers with education in ancient Greek and Roman past and get them acquainted with the ancient sites during the excursion program. In March, we organized, together with University of Tartu, Göttingen, Groningen, Ghent and Uppsala, the Ancient World Winter School, which was entitled Big and Small, Global and Local Dimensions of Antiquity, for postgraduate students and their supervisors in different disciplines connected to the study of antiquity. We put also up cultural program. First of all, fantastic festival of Finnish film, the New Finnish Cinema, as it was called, ran for a week in the cinema of the Greek film archives, the Ateenan-instituutti, in March. It was organized together with the Finnish Film Foundation and Ateenan-instituutti in Athens, supported financially by the Embassy of Finland in Athens, and curated by Ingo Starts. It was truly nice to see that recent Finnish films attracted over the week audiences very overwhelmingly. The visiting film directors met their Greek colleagues at the event and at the Institute to talk about film and its making in our respective countries. In the domain of visual arts, the illustrator and printmaker Reima's work was exhibited in the premises of the Institute in June. By the way, the program you have in your hands for this evening is an example of her lovely, cheerful and beautiful designs. The joint pan-Nordic exhibition on early travellers to Greece, with the title Greece Through the Eyes of the Travellers from North, travelled again in Greece over the year, and with us it was put up in Domokos, in conjunction with the earlier mentioned presentation of the results of the Melitea archaeological program in November. The so-called Menalios Tromos Road Run event was run again for the 5th time in October to promote the knowledge of the ancient Menalian games on the foot on the mouth Mainalos in the area where one of the Institute's excavation sites is situated. The hybrid format has naturally become a standard way to communicate our events. We have also dedicated special efforts to creating edited recordings which have an afterlife, a continuation as a kind of repository and permanent library of our events for anyone to see and return to. Now I'm going to take you to various archaeological sites. Finnish Institute runs altogether 5 archaeological field programs, at the moment either with field campaigns or having entered their publication phase. At Arakamitai in Arcadia, which you see there on the map, only facilities for finds and storerooms were constructed, as such, of course, a very important undertaking. I will now present the results of the other 4 programs with fieldwork activities during the report period. We go first to Melitea. Melitea archaeological program is a cooperation between the Epheria of Antiquities of Theotis and Evrytania and the Finnish Institute at Athens, directed by Konstantina Psaroyanni and myself, with Stavros Lamproyannis as field director. Que vevea idieteres Evkaristies, den kirja Psaroyanni puine masimas apopsedo. The second field season of the 5-year program was carried out in June-July. The site of ancient Melitea, one of the most important city-states of Achaea Theotis in antiquity, is located east of the modern village with the same name. It is situated in the municipality of Domokos, at the northern foot of Mount Ortes, near the mythically important river Enipeus. Through its strategic position, Melitea controlled the main roads connecting northern Greece with Thessaly and southern Greece via Thermopylae, and as a well-fortified, Melitea was a dominant city in the area, especially during the Hellenistic and Roman times, but the remains of its handsome archaic wall on the Acropolis testify that its history extends well to the earlier centuries as well. Melitea figures in several ancient written sources, Thucydides, Xenophon, Plutarch and Strabo mentioning it, and we have a number of long inscriptions indicating the arrangements of the Melitaean polis. The ancient city is stacked on 3 large natural plateaus, that of Acropolis, the Anopolis and the Katopolis, Lower and Upper cities that is, which are divided by the inner cross wall. The Chora and the Polis occupied a large area, the boundaries of which are known somewhat accurately thanks to those mentioned texts, and also thanks to new archaeological evidence. Due to very large size of the site, approximately 70 hectares, a LiDAR investigation was carried out by Geomatics based in Athens during the first field season in 2022. Apart from being a great help for getting an overview of the area in terms of archaeology, it has provided also material for archaeological historical investigations. In his earlier mentioned Grifo's volume, Robin Rönnlund studied the LiDAR results by comparing them with the German scholar and epigraphist Habbo Gerhard Lolling's remarkably detailed plan of the site in his sketches and notes depicting the visible architectural remains Lolling observed when he visited the place in 1882. Our work during the second field season in Melitea consisted of detailed stratigraphic excavations on the Acropolis, further clearing off and documenting the finds from the fill and collapse of the X-shaped trench excavated in 1971, the only earlier excavations in the site, seen here before our program started, and here after the work of the last summer's season. Also, magnetometric prospection in the selected areas in Honor and Katopolis was carried out, and mapping and measuring the multiple walls, particularly on the Acropolis area, continued. Excavation trenches were opened on the Acropolis in 3 areas, marked as trenches A, B, and C. Altogether, 14 rather well-built limestone walls were exposed, as well as parts of substantial drains. These walls seem to continue under the layer of the fill with straight orientation beyond the cleared area. It could be that even 5 different phases in architectural layout be discerned in the stratigraphy. Detailed and systematic work was carried out in Trench C and documented photogrammetrically. In the areas A and B, work was still characterized by partly clearing of the fill and collapse of the X-shaped trenches of the 1971 excavations, yet in deeper layers and extended areas, documentation was stratigraphic. In general terms, the majority of the finds can be dated to the late Hellenistic and early Roman times. Generally, rather well-preserved diagnostic pottery in large, well-preserved fragments of stamped tiles, lamps, metal objects of bronze, iron, and lead, including a bronze rider spur, and lead fishing weights and hooks. There were coins, bones, including astragalli, as well as small fragments of figurines and glass were discovered. Let us mention here a fill layer in Trench C consisting of soil mixed with ceramics, most datable to the late Hellenistic and early Roman periods, and on animal bones mixed with tile fragments. There, an apparently earlier, probably archaic bronze bird figurine and bronze pendant were found together. One possible interpretation could be that they were placed in the fill as foundation deposit for a new building phase, but interpretations will have to wait until we have continued our work in this area. Namely, below the fill layer, a large assemblage of over 40 conical and discoid terracotta loom weights were uncovered, with majority of the weights piled up in one place. Another assemblage of loom weights came to light in the north side of the wall, and fragments of the same large vessel, a cooking pot, here being conserved, were dispersed on both sides of this wall. This indicates that the loom weights, assemblages, and other objects fell from a higher floor and scattered on both sides of the wall in a collapse, probably caused by the fire which destroyed the loom. Magnetic surveys and prospection were carried out in 2023 by Professor Grigoris Tsokas from the University of Thessaloniki and his team. They were carried on in 5 locations, the first ones in summer using differential magnetometry, and the second ones in February using electrical tomography and ground probing radar GPR. On the Acropolis as well as at the spot suggested to be a location of a theatre in the lower polis. The results give clear indications of roads and city walls, foundations, and rectangular shapes that could point to buried ruins, edifices, and vestiges. They also indicate a potential great street plan in the lower polis area. In addition, a study of our LiDAR data by Lucas Jari may indicate that this was possibly the case also in the upper polis area. A column with inscriptions was found, I would say, was found 3 years ago in the field just outside the city wall. With the help of the locals, it was taken to the Museum of Lamia, and Robin Rönnlund and Lambros Stavroyannis have worked on the column to document it very recently. Together with Rich Potter from the Gothenburg University, Robin has carried out a photogrammetric scanning using the so-called structure from motion modeling. And you see here the inscription on the column is apparently a palimpsest of 6 manumission inscriptions, preliminary datable to Augustinian period. It names 2 earlier known strategoi of the Thessalian League and 1 earlier known one. Conservation was systematically planned and arranged during the work season and carried out by Eva Apostolakopoulou. In the work premises arranged for the program by the Cultural Association of Militea in the former school of the village, and also in the Museum of Lamia for the work needing laboratory conditions. Her work has been fantastic. For our daily well-being during the field season, our beautiful lodgings in Domokos, with stunning view over the Thessalian plain, have played a big role. The Metropolitan and its house has provided us that opportunity, and we thank it for it very warmly. Then we go and travel to Epirus to Fotike. The Fotike project was a 5-year synergasia between Janis Huljeras and the Ephoriate of Antiquities of Thesprotia and Björn Fossen of the University of Helsinki, who has provided me with the following reports. The project has consisted of field survey of the urban centre of the Roman and early medieval town, Fotike and its closest environments, geophysical prospection of part of the urban centre, as well as excavation at some places of special interests. The 5th and last season of the project took place in early summer 2023, including additional field survey, cleaning of possible building remains identified earlier on the Marutsi Hills, and conservation study and documentation of the finds of the previous field seasons. The areas we focused on 23 was near the urban centre of Fotike and the Marutsi Hill, and in the west by the Hotkova Lake. The road leading to the west from Fotike soon reaches the corner of a large plain where the seasonal Hotkova Lake is located. Just where the road enters the plain, a small hill with the church of Agioi Theodoroi is situated. Lots of pottery and tiles were found here when the cemetery of the church was enlarged 20 to 30 years ago. The hill is strategically located as the road leading to the west from Fotike separates into 2 here. one continuing towards Kirika and later Ikuminitsa in the west, and another leading towards Neohori and the Kalamas Valley in the north. Continuing in northwestern direction from Aio Theodori, the road passes by the early Christian Basilica of Kristallopigi, which was excavated 2000 and 2001 by the 8th Ephorate of Byzantine Antiquities and published in the first volume of the Thesprotia expedition. The basilica is located on the highest point of Rahi Valley and offers excellent views in all directions. Further wall remains and tile as well as pottery were spotted during the excavation of the basilica close to the rich spring at Platanissa and the chapel of St. George. The remains of Aio Theodori, Rahi Valley and Platanissa belong to 2 of 3 suburban settlements of Fotike located along the main road leading from Fotike towards the Kalamas River Valley. In 2020, we had documented Roman building remains immediately to the south of Paleoklisi on the uppermost eastern ridge of Maruzi Hill. The ridge where the remains are located runs in north to south direction and consists of easily eroding flysch. The urban center of Fotike is located in a shallow ghetto extending roughly to the foot of the Maruzi Ridge. Due to its geological formation, the ridge is not the place where anybody would construct a suburban farmstead or erect a grave monument. It would, however, be topographically well suited for a fortification to protect the western flank of the urban center. Any approach from the west towards the urban center is de facto blocked by the Maruzi Ridge, and only one pass leads through it next to Paleoklisi. Theoretically, one could therefore envisage a fortification wall along the uppermost eastern Maruzi Ridge. In order to get a better picture of the Roman remains on this ridge, we cleared all vegetation from the area following the uppermost ridge. We identified the collapsed layer, which covers 10 to 5 meters. It turned out that this layer does not continue towards the north or south along the ridge. We are therefore most likely dealing with a single building, perhaps a tower, Björn von Sen gives this in citation marks, constructed to oversee people's approaches from the west. There is a good view from the Maruzi Tower to the Paramithia Castle, to Kakia Scala, through which Fotike is connected with Dotona further in the east, and to Prophetis Ilias in the west, a summit from where one can see far towards the north and the east. While removing the topsoil above the collapsed tower remains, we found 2 coins, a small iron key, sherds of 2 cooking pots, a lid of small storage jar, and fragments of Roman tegule. Both the coins are Antoniani in date, one of them minted by Gallienus. The cooking pots can be dated to the second half of the 3rd century, and the small iron key to the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. The tower, in citation mark, can thus be dated to the second half of the 3rd, or perhaps the early 4th century, a period when Epirus for the first time was struck by barbarian incursions. This is maybe the second one. No, it's Björn von Sen. From where we go to Crete. Retimno Country Hillside Archaeological Project is directed by Björn von Sen from the University of Helsinki again, and Anna Lucia Takata from Consiglio Nazionale della Ricerche is an interdisciplinary regional archaeological project. Its aim is to investigate selected parts of a 25 square kilometer large area located in the southwest of modern Retimno, and the aim is to form a picture of the diachronic development of human presence and ecology. The 3 main find spots during the 3 first field seasons are Ailias, with finds from the late Neolithic, early Bronze Age, until the late Roman/early Byzantine period. Secondly, the area east of the cemetery of Suridi, partly with finds that resemble those of Ailias. And finally, Kefala, Mundru, producing mainly archaic and classical finds. During our 4th field season in 23, we continued surveying fields next to Kefala Mundru, although we mainly focused on opening trial trenches on the southeastern slopes of Kefala and east of the cemetery of Suridi. The aim was to check out whether the pottery collected from the surface gives a representative and correct picture of the activity at our site, but also to get a better understanding of the stratigraphy and chronology at the site. In 2021, we had noted a concentration of the Middle Minoan 3 to Middle Minoan 1 finds near the modern cemetery of Suridi. Trial trenches were now opened there where the highest amount of Bronze Age finds were earlier collected. In Trench 2, we uncovered a layer containing badly preserved neopalatial kitchen, cores and fine ware sherds, approximately 1.5 meters below the surface. At roughly the same depth, in the trench number 3, we found remains of a wall resting on the bedrock with some neopalatial pottery next to it. These finds confirmed the presence of neopalatial site here. The construction of modern terracing and installations linked to modern agricultural exploitation has resulted in the destruction of most of the Bronze Age structures, and at the same time has brought Bronze Age pottery to the surface. The Kefala hill offers not only great views towards the north and all the way down the sea at Petra, but it also towards the important mountain pass leading to Plakias on the southern coast of Crete. The size of the substantial archaic to classical site on the hill can now be estimated to have been approximately 6 hectares. On the basis of the survey finds, the flooruit of the settlement seemed to have occurred between the 6th and 4th centuries BC, although a few geometric searches point to a possibility of it having been settled since the early Iron Age. The trial trenches opened on the southeastern slopes of Kefala broadened our understanding of this very interesting site. Of special interest were Trench A1 and Trench B3. The first one was the deepest of our trenches and offered a very clear stratigraphy. Lowermost layer was a find-rich deposit that produced large amounts of pottery, some animal bones, and a few she cells. This rich deposit contained large amounts of different types of drinking cups, more than 100 different ones, in fact, and lots of pithoi sherds. There were also many large open vessels, such as lekanai, some crateres and jugs, 3 mortars and transport amphora, and 13 pyramidal loom weights. Striking is the near total absence of cooking pots or plates, as well as smaller bowls. Most of the finds can be dated to the late classical period. A handful of imports, for instance, from Athens, dates to the creation of the deposit rather securely to approximately 400 to 350 BC. Only a tiny fraction of the deposit was excavated, implying that the total number of drinking cups dumped here should be estimated in thousands rather than hundreds, and probably originates from some kind of communal festivities, such as Björn Forsen. On top of the deposit was first the layer of hardly threatened soil. All the pottery dates to the late classical period. Other 4 layers followed, consisting of large and small stones,
pointing to a usual manner of terrace construction. Every layer produced pottery, although the number of sherds amounted only to a handful from each, thus indicating that the terrace above the deposit was constructed only shortly after the creation of the deposit. Pottery collected in trends B2 and 4 support the impression that the terracing on the southeastern slope of Kefalla dates to the late classical period. Finally, trends B3 gave us totally different finds. Shortly before the surface, we uncovered a wall. Next to the wall, near the surface, we uncovered a layer of stones. We interpreted the wall first as an old abandoned terrace wall. However, when the removing of the stone filling on the southeastern side of the wall, we came across as much pottery and animal bones as on the northwestern side. Furthermore, the wall seems to make a 90-degree turn next to the edge of the terrace, possibly indicating that we are dealing with the remains of a building. The pottery from this trench was homogeneously early Iron Age in date, covering the 9th and 8th and possibly also 17th centuries. The assemblage includes a wide range of different storage vessels, amphorae and cooking pots, loads of animal bones, mostly ovaripeds, but also swine and bovine were collected. The beginning of the settlement of Kefalla, the Munro, can, on the basis of these finds, be certainly pushed back to the early Iron Age. So far, there is little evidence of the fluoroid of the site after the mid-4th century BC. But alas, writes Björn, one never knows what the next day will bring along. The last field program to be presented here takes us to Sicily. The cityscape project of Naxos in Sicily has concentrated on a thorough re-evaluation of the urban territory of the settlement. The project has been carried out as part of the research collaboration agreement between the Museum of Naxos and the Finnish Institute of Athens, and the third partner of the project has been the Finnish Institute in Rome. The project directors are Jari Pakkanen and Maria Costanza Lentini. The 2023 season at Naxos was carried out in stages from April to September. 2024 field season was conducted in April, very recently, that is a month ago only. The excavations are financed by the Archaeological Park of Naxos and Taormina, and the documentation was carried out as part of the three-dimensional development program of the Finnish Institute at Athens. The field seasons have been part of the collaborative project Urban Landscape of Naxos in Sicily, initiated in 2012. Professor Jari Pakkanen reports as follows. The fieldwork at Naxos has had three main aims: documenting the architectural remains unearthed since the 1950s, carrying out geophysical prospection inside the city walls, and excavating new small-scale test trenches at strategic locations. The documentation project at Naxos has been very closely linked with the 3D development program of the Institute. The settlement was the first Greek colony in Sicily, founded in 734 BCE by oikists from Chalkis on Euboea and Naxos in the Cyclades. The ongoing fieldwork season is a direct continuation of the excavations started in 2019 at the crossroads of Platea A and Stenopos 7. The location of the trench is indicated by the yellow square on the slide. In addition, further study of the domestic architectural material from a well excavated in 2015 and 16 has been carried out in the storerooms of the Archaeological Park of Naxos. An initial report of the material was published in 2022. Location of the well is indicated by the red circle here. The excavation have been directed by Maria Costanza Lentini, and the Jari Pakkanen has been responsible for the 3D documentation of the project. Platea A is the main east-west main street, and Stenopos 7 is the narrower north-south street in the layout of the classical city. The top layers of the southern half of the excavated area are characterized by a collapsed roof lying very near the current surface. The excavation in summer 23 showed that they belonged, quite uniquely to Naxos, to a house constructed in the crossroads in the early 4th century BCE. The city was destroyed by Syracuse in 403 BCE and abandoned. But the new discoveries at Crossroads A7 indicate that there was limited scale reoccupation of the area in the early 4th century BCE. This has not been discovered in earlier excavations of the city. The very large house was built in area A7, blocking Stenopos 7, so the classical road network could not have been used anymore in this phase. The excavations were continued this spring, in April, concentrating on the interior of the monumental base at Crossroads A7. The discovered large Corinthian amphora is best interpreted as refoundation deposit of the classical city. It very likely also had a practical function in laying out the new city grid. Further analysis of the discovery will be presented next year at the annual meeting. One of the main aims of the new topographical survey of the city has been to understand how the urban 5th century grid of Naxos was designed and executed. The joint 2013-24 excavations at the crossroads of Platea A and Stenopos 6, 7, 8 and 9 have resulted in significant new data for statistical analysis. A summary of this work was presented earlier this year in the seminar at the Institute. We just take ourselves from the field now, and in the second and the last phase of our meeting. Namely, it is my pleasure now to present you the main speaker of this evening, Professor Mika Kajava, Professor of the Greek language and literature from the University of Helsinki, where he has held a chair since 2005, after having held professorship of ancient languages and culture in the University of Turku for 4 years. Mika was the chairman of the board of the foundation of the Finnish Institute at Athens between 2013 and 19, and thus he knows the institute very well. Yet not only this institute here, but also the Finnish Institute in Rome, where he was the director between 2003 and 6, and later served as the member of their board till last year. Mika has been awarded recognition by numerous scholarly institutions, associations and societies. He is, for example, commander of the Order of Phoenix from the Hellenic Republic and member of the Academy of Athens there in Rome. I just picked up a couple of the most enthralling sounding ones here. He's also a member of board of the numerous international societies and associations for classics, classical archaeology and classical linguistics. But as a scholar, Mika is extremely versatile and breathtakingly productive. His published record covers equally ancient Greek and Roman antiquity and chronologically stretches from prehistoric horizons with the studies on Linear B to Byzantine era, which is rather rare in our days of ever-increasing and narrowing specialisms. He has published enormously on Greek and Latin epigraphy, onomastics, female names in particular, prosopography, ancient gastronomy, Isthmian games, witchcraft and magic, role of astragalli, etc., etc. But in particular, Mika's work covers a great variety of intriguing and central themes relating to ancient Greek and Roman religion, such as dedications, nature of divinity, purifications, oracles, and epithets of gods. Mika published a book naming the gods, an onomastic study of divine epithets. It was published in 2022, to mention just one example. Now we are very fortunate and honored this evening to hear Mika Kajava talk to us on one of such themes relating to ancient Greek religion, a topic he has worked on recently, namely touching the divine as a form of human-divine encounter in the ancient world. Please, Mika, take the floor is yours for taking us to a place, or places maybe, where we may be able to touch the gods. Eventually, maybe even through a variety of human senses. Let's see.
Excellency, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I wish to thank the director for her very kind words, and secondly for the invitation to come and give a talk at the Institute's traditional annual meeting. And this is a special anniversary, and that's why I would like to congratulate the entire Institute and their staff, the whole staff, for the 40 years of a very prosperous activity, archaeological and other, in Athens and elsewhere in the ancient Greek world, so including Sicily. As the director said, I have a decades-long interest in various methods, especially sacred dedications, through which people communicated with their gods. And this is the background of the present talk. Its subject, which is very, very broad, is by no means unexplored. Giorgio Camassa, Angelos Haniotis, Anja Klöckner, William Mack, Clarice Petra, Katie Rask, Gil Renberg, Florian Steger, Polly Wedel, Henk Versnell, and so on and so on. They have all contributed significantly to research in this field, and I'm certainly indebted to them for some of the ideas presented here. There were a myriad of ways to make contact with the gods, direct and indirect, tangible and more spiritual. The accounts and representations of humans interacting with gods are well known from the earliest literature and art to survive from ancient Greece. In the following, I will focus on physical contacts between gods and mortals. Human divine encounters are usually sensory-based. Sight and hearing are central. And as you know, the gods were also thought to smell sweet, and places they touched could retain a pleasant odor, making scent a sign of contact with the divine. However, the divine touch that a mortal feels is also quite prominent. A closer physical interaction recurs not only in many mythological stories where gods are in various ways connected with mortals, but also in historical sources, especially in connection with healing cults. Then the gods are perceived to approach and touch people either in dreams or visions. Such encounters have been described both in literature and in inscribed healing reports and votive reliefs. But the interaction would also go in the opposite direction. Humans were often in close physical contact with the gods in various rituals as well as in many everyday situations. If this contact implies touching, then its object is normally a cult statue. In mythological stories, close contact can sometimes be facilitated by the fact that the god appears in the form of a human. On the other hand, it was not uncommon for deities to take animal form. Zeus captures Ganymede as an eagle, takes Europe with him as a bull, seduces Leda in the form of a swan, or even impregnates Dana in the shape of a golden shower. Physical contacts between gods and humans could also be made using various means and instruments with varying consequences. Zeus had his lightning bolt. The healing gods might use a staff, and a discus thrown by a god like Apollo might have hit a mortal, and so on. Furthermore, a healing deity like Asclepius, it was believed, could touch a mortal in the guise of a serpent. As for terminology, the nature of the touch could be variously expressed. The standard verbal expression in Greek is haptestai or ephaptestai, whilst tinganein and psauein often denote a lighter touch or brush. But if you let hold of someone's hand, then the appropriate expression was kratein. Jesus often acted this way when healing, while Asclepius managed with a lighter touch. In mythology, divine touch can convey and transfer divine power forward. There was also a term for this sort of contact in Greek, enelysios, meaning lightning struck or blessed, and it is possible that this is connected to the idea of the fields of Elysion, where those who partook of the divine touch ended up. Often this sort of contact is quite violent and may be accompanied by the power of fire. According to the Eleusis myths, the goddess Demeter, grieving her own daughter, attempted to immortalize her nursling Demophon by burning him in the fire, and Asclepius was born while his mother was being burned at the stake. He later became a true god at the touch of Zeus's lightning strike. These two gods, Zeus and Asclepius, are perhaps the most renowned mythical touchers. Zeus even had a special epithet related to this, ephaptor, meaning literally toucher. This epiclesis famously appears in Aeschylus's Suppliants, one of the key themes of which is precisely the idea of touch. In this play, the 50 Danaids are making appeals to Zeus to preserve them from marriage with their aggressive Egyptian cousins. In doing so, they frequently refer to their ancestress Io and her story, emphasizing the god's special connection with their Genos and reminding him that he was the one who delivered Io from her suffering. This naiad nymph was regarded as the first priestess of Hera, the wife of Zeus. Zeus, as usual, fell in love with her, and to protect her from the wrath of Hera, changed her into a white heifer. Hera persuaded Zeus to give her the heifer and sent Argos to watch her. Zeus thereupon sent the god Hermes, who lulled Argos to sleep and killed him. Hera then sent a gadfly to torment Io, who therefore wandered all over the earth and at last reached Egypt, where she was restored to her original form and gave birth to a son called Epaphos. The restoration itself is remarkable. Io's kneeling at the Nile's edge before her transformation points to the purification which she must undergo in order to have her form restored. The scene of transformation with Zeus touching Io, which is depicted on a number of vases, was accomplished through touch and breath. It would all happen by the mere stroke and touch of his unterrifying hand, as Prometheus had previously prophesied to Io. This made Zeus the ephaptor, or toucher. As soon as he touched Io, he brought her back into fully human form and stopped her pain caused by the gadfly. In the same context, Zeus makes Io pregnant, whether with her consent or not. It all happens in a moment, which is typical of divine interventions in general, and Zeus begets Epaphos in Io's womb with a touch. Io passively receives the burden from him, perhaps in accordance with the contemporary view and conception. In any case, Zeus's touch has a triple effect. First, it indicates Io's restored purity and causes a transformation. Second, it leads to the birth of Epaphos. And third, it ends Io's suffering. In this context, I can't help but think of certain healing reports of Epidauros, where women who have gone through purification rituals are delivering as a result of Asclepius' touch, so that at the same time their painful conditions disappear. Similarly, Zeus eliminated the gadfly, which caused Io significant suffering. The expressions related to the touching, like the phrase ephaptor ius, may be deeply charged. The Danaids cast Zeus in ambiguous terms that recognize his status as both a sexual assailant and a lover. Ephaptor could be read neutrally to mean toucher of Io, warmly as caresser, but also more sinisterly as her captor or seizure. The word permits connotations of different modes of physical contact, and, given Io's story, invites the plurality of meanings. What then about the name of the son Io gave birth to, Epaphos? Clearly this name, which was also associated with the Egyptian bull god Apis, is intended to indicate that he was born through the touch of Zeus. This type of etymologizing wordplay is quite common in Aeschylus, especially concerning proper names. However, considering that the actual origin and derivation of the name Epaphos is uncertain, it might in fact itself have been responsible for the myth that Epaphos was conceived by the touch of Zeus. Let's then have a look at how the healing gods interacted with humans. The touch of Asclepius is well known from mythology. Thanks to his descendants from Apollo and through his upbringing, Asclepius had received the gift of healing. And while still mortal, he even resurrected the dead, most famously Hippolytos. Hades then complained to Zeus that the number of the dead was steadily diminishing because of Asclepius' actions, and so Zeus struck the demigod with an immortalizing thunderbolt, thus completing the transformation of Asclepius from a mortal doctor to a divine physician. This is how his activities were explained and justified. And in multiple sources, literary and epigraphic, as well as votive reliefs, he appears as a healer par excellence, either alone or in the company of his family members, who were all healers. Asclepius is best known from the classical votive reliefs and the 4th century BC healing documents of Epidauros, both describing the same religious phenomenon that took place in the sanctuaries of the god, that is, incubation at night. This means the religious practice of sleeping in a sacred area with the intention of experiencing a divinely inspired dream or cure. After a prayer, ablution, sacrifice, and other rituals, the patients were put in a state of disorientation, also known as the liminality phase, when they slept in the temple so that they could contact the god. Eventually, the patient, who was now transformed after meeting the deity, was reaccepted into society with his or her new status. The devotees thus learned in the dream how they had to behave with regard to their articulated suffering, so they could put into practice the specific therapy proposals from their dream, if they had received such. Out of gratitude, the patients finally made offerings to Asclepius in the form of votive reliefs or inscriptions, in which they reported about the events that occurred during their stay in the sanctuary. Here you can see a detail of a text from Epidauros telling what happened to a man from Thessaly who had marks, perhaps tattoos, on his forehead. The most famous such reports are indeed from Epidauros, but the topic of dreaming also occurs in the Hippocratic writings, and miraculous healings are known from literature as well. However, it must be remembered that sleeping and dreaming was not an absolute prerequisite for sick humans to recover. People also routinely visited Asclepieia, not to mention healing sanctuaries of other gods, to make offerings and pray for cures without engaging in incubation. The act of healing is very often based on the experience of touch or other sensory connection. If hands are used, the method is typically either touching or the laying on of the hand or hands. Jesus also operated this way, as did Apollonios of Tyana, the charismatic religious leader and miracle worker in the 1st century AD. Both were said to have raised people from the dead. In late antique Athens, the Neoplatonic philosopher Proclus, who was seriously ill, was similarly cured by Telesphorus, one of the sons of Asclepius. He came closer, presented himself, and touched Proclus's head, and then just disappeared. Interestingly, although many healing stories from Epidauros are quite strange and miraculous, they show that Asclepius often works like a contemporary physician. However, there are some telling exceptions, like the treatment of the skin disease of a certain Kleinatas. The usual treatment in antiquity would probably have consisted of the application of topical drugs intended to kill parasites. Here, however, we see that divine therapy involves touch in a rather harsh and radical way. Asclepius does not need any normal medicines, the effectiveness of which would only have become apparent over time. The mere and immediate touch is enough to heal the patient and manifest the god's power. I will now show some very well-known examples, visual and literary, of how Asclepius and other healers were believed to cure people by touch. In this case, from Piraeus, the god Asclepius, behind whom stands Hygieia, his daughter, is placing his hands on the shoulder of a female patient sleeping atop a clean and animal skin while her family looks on. As for the skins, they must often have been the raw hides of freshly sacrificed animals. And as Petra Pakkanen, who is definitely the best expert in ancient Greek animal skins, points out to me, the sleeper may even have been sometimes wrapped inside the skin. Close and prolonged contact with the pungent-smelling raw animal skin sounds less appealing, but maybe it was worth the effort if, as it seems, it was believed the human agent could come into closer physical contact with the healing god in this way. This is a famous case from the sanctuary of the healing hero Amphiaraos, situated in the borderland between Boeotia and Attica. It is a full relief with several scenes, on the left showing Amphiaraos using an instrument to treat the right shoulder or upper arm of a male patient called Archinos, who in the middle is also represented as sleeping at the cult side, while a serpent licks the same area, and who on the right stands and makes a gesture of prayer. Atop the frame is a pair of eyes, possibly symbolizing that a dream had been seen. This relief was found in Epidauros, but has been considered to be of Athenian origin. The figures from the left may be identified as Hygieia, Asclepius' daughter, the god himself, and two of his sons, between whom the patient rests. Interestingly, one of the sons seems to touch the patient's head with a stick-like instrument. Regarding the inscribed healing reports from Epidauros, here are some where touch plays an important role. This story tells about a man with paralyzed fingers. The context of the dream is particularly suitable because to play the knuckle bones, you have to throw them, and you need your hand and your fingers. What is also interesting is that after jumping on the man's hand, Asclepius stretches and straightens the patient's fingers one by one. This type of treatment, a sort of physiotherapy, is paralleled by a case known from the Hippocratic praxis. As is typical of the healing documents, the text also emphasizes their moral and didactic aspect, with the obvious purpose of overcoming possible objections from future clients. This case is perhaps or probably related to an erotic dream. It seems that the pregnant Andromache had trouble giving birth, but Asclepius' touch successfully initiated the delivery. If Archibas is the child's father, the young boy mentioned in the text might be a staff member at the sanctuary who had prepared Andromache for the nocturnal incubation. And then the handsome youth had then returned to her dream. And here is a further example of how Asclepius applies therapeutic massage and kisses also a female patient who is suffering from severe stomach pains. As usual, the patient makes a full recovery. As for literature, in Aristophanes' Wealth from the year 388 BC, there's a remarkable report that a spying slave called Carion gives to his mistress regarding the personified god of wealth, Plutos, who is blind and therefore unable to distribute wealth fairly among the citizens. The god is taken to an Asclepieion, either in Athens or at Piraeus, so that he can regain his sight by means of Asclepius' intervention. The goal was achieved after wealth had bathed, entered the sacred precinct, dedicated cakes and other offerings upon an altar, bedded down in an unspecified structure among many other ailing individuals, heard the temple servant instruct everyone to remain silent after the lamps had been extinguished, and then slept there, as Asclepius, with the help of his daughters, examined and treated each of his patients, finally reaching wealth and curing him by applying gauze to his eyelids, and then having his daughters cover Wealth's head and face with scarlet cloth before summoning 2 serpents to lick his eyelids. The patient recovers in an instant, as the playwright expresses it through a funny simile. The participation of animals in healing is known from other sources as well. In one case, from Epidaurus, a man with gout is healed when a goose bites him on the foot. However, if an animal is involved, it was typically either a sacred non-venomous serpent, whose presence at healing sanctuaries is well attested, or a dog that was perceived to effect a cure rather than the god doing so directly. While in the cases featuring a serpent, the god himself is probably represented by the animal. Dogs were rather his agent, as may be suggested by the observation that the tales about sick people being cured by dogs use the term hypar, or waking dream, to indicate that they had been awake and not dreaming at the time. There are references to Asclepius' healing action in other literature as well. According to Ilian, who wrote in the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries AD, after recovering from consumption, the comic poet Theopompos, a contemporary of Aristophanes, dedicated an altar with a relief showing himself lying in bed while Asclepius stretched his hand toward him. That the moment survived into the imperial period is quite possible. However, it is uncertain whether the relief indicates incubation, nor can it be linked to the Athenian Asclepieion with certainty. A very vivid and personal description is given by the well-known rhetorician Ilius Aristides, who frequented the famous healing shrine of Asclepius near Pergamon, seeking relief from the illnesses that constantly plagued him. In this passage from around the mid-2nd century AD, Aristides seems to be somewhere on the border between sleep and waking, when he feels the gut almost palpable. As one may see, Aristides' experience is permeated by very strong sensations and emotions. An interesting example underlining the importance of sensory contacts is found in a long and very detailed dedication found in Epidaurus, which Marcos Julius Apellas, a prominent Carian, set up there around AD 160, after receiving several instructions from Asclepius for various ailments. I will only refer to 2 points here. The second phrase, indicated in bold, says that the god had touched both his right hand and his chest. In addition, according to the first phrase in bold, Asclepius urged Apelles to rub himself by the akoai, perhaps meaning ears, against the wall of the sanctuary bath. This might refer to a large sculpture representing Asclepius' ears, or perhaps we are dealing with a series of votive ears fixed on a wall. In any case, the prescription given by the god underlines in a very concrete way the importance of the encounter between God and man, which can be realized through touch and the sense of hearing. Asclepius must hear the prayer and request of the human patient, who for that purpose pushes against the wall to communicate and hear the instructions given by the god. A further interesting variation on how Asclepius can be encountered comes from Rome's Tiber Island Asclepieion. What is noteworthy here is that the power of the god's hand is transferred through the sacred platform to the blind Gaius's own hand. It follows that the touch of his own hand is now enough to heal. In a certain way, this might bring to mind the famous hand of the god goal. You remember that Diego Armando Maradona scored against England in a football match in 1986 at the World Cup. So Gaius was cured of his blindness. But if one looks more closely at the votive reliefs depicting the encounters between gods and humans, one may see that the eye contact between God and man, be it one way or mutual, is relatively rare. Eye contact associated with touch is known to some extent from the votive reliefs associated with Asclepius or other healers. Otherwise, it is usually avoided. Occasionally, one deity, often a goddess, looks at one worshipper, probably often the dedicator, who, however, usually does not look back. Sometimes, rarely, the divinity and the worshipper are represented on votive reliefs as recognizing each other's presence by gestures, body language, and mutual eye contact, as in this case showing the hero Theseus and a human called Sosippos. The fact that Theseus' name is written in the nominative not only emphasizes the close connection between him and the dedicator, but also suggests that the hero is perceived as being actually present. Otherwise, the actual touches of the god are rare in the reliefs. Some evidence is found in the so-called document reliefs, which have been moderately preserved from Athens. In this one, honoring Asclepiodoros, an ambassador from Phokis, on the left there is Athene, flanked by Boule and Demos, modeled on representations of Hera and Zeus respectively, who are simultaneously crowning the mortal figure between them. What is striking about this relief is that on the right, two versions of the same Zeus type are juxtaposed, indistinguishable except in size, representing the Athenian Demos and the honorant in question. In another example, the Athenian assembly honors a certain Proxenides, son of Proxenos, of the polis of Knidos in Asia Minor. What the accompanying relief shows are the goddess Athena on the right, representing the Athenian collective responsible for the decree, and another deity on the left, usually identified as Aphrodite, as a symbol of the city, Knidos, of which she was the patron deity. It seems very likely that Proxenides, appearing among the goddesses, was granted the status of Proxenos of the Athenians, their official contact and guest friend at his own community. The activity of Proxenides, which benefits both cities, Athens and Knidos, is politically motivated and can therefore be depicted symbolically using divine iconography in a way that would have been highly atypical in votive reliefs. There's a further noteworthy point connected with the reliefs showing human-divine encounters. The human in contact is typically smaller than the god. This feature seems to materialize a coherent set of ideas about immortals and mortal religious experience. It can hardly be taken as a purely art historical phenomenon devoid of theological significance. Touch or some other physical contact also works in the other direction. Both in mythology and in real life, there are many examples of humans trying to touch a deity, usually by embracing a cult statue. Unlike in the votive reliefs and the healing reports, in these cases, the context is different because the divine image is normally static. However, this does not mean that a mortal cannot experience the real presence and power of the deity, for even if statues of gods were not believed to have powers continually and unconditionally, in some situations they seemed to have possessed an agency that manifested vital functions so that they were filled with life in a very real sense. Physical contact with a cult statue could happen for many reasons. For example, those who swore an oath sometimes did not simply invoke a god, but also touched the deity's statue, as shown by the epigraphically attested expression tuagalmatos haptestai, to touch the statue. However, most people probably encountered and touched their gods in multiple everyday situations. For example, at home, families and the oikos developed their own close and intimate interactions with particular deities. Apollo Aguieus was at the door, Hestia at the hearth, Zeus in the courtyard and pantry. In a more public context, among the most common cases of divine human encounters were those when people in distress embraced a cult statue. An early and well-known example can be found in the Iliad, where the Trojan Cassandra clings to a cult statue of Athena in supplication for her protection. This mode of operation was common throughout antiquity, and later also imperial statues served as places of refuge, not only in Rome, but also in the provinces. An anecdote in Philostratos tells of a 2nd century governor at Aspendos in Pamphylia who risked being killed by the mob and took refuge at an imperial statue. Asylum at the emperor's statue was particularly important for slaves. This could worry prospective buyers of slaves, who might be reassured by the seller that the slave was neither a gambler nor a thief, nor had he ever fled to an emperor's statue. Although touching and even kissing cult statues must have been fairly common, there are few sources that explicitly address this type of interaction. And this is not surprising, for these activities appear to have been performed as a personal gesture more commonly than as a part of public ritual. The embracing of images in desperation and the touching and kissing of images by devotees provided a context within which the image formed an active part of a tactile relationship, in which the tactility served an emotional, practical, or spiritual purpose. In addition, cult statues could be specifically treated as though they were capable of forming romantic or sexual relationships, without being the targets of agalmatophilia, which is a different matter. Statues, or certain parts of them, could also wear out from constant contact, just as can be seen today in the case of numerous good luck statues all around the world. Sometimes near the statues there are footprints carved in stone, or miniature representations of feet placed in cavities on the base of divine images. In some cases, perhaps these could symbolize the worshipper's presence near the gods and communication with them, whether physical or not. Physical impact associated with an image was not restricted to healing, and a range of qualities is found in the ancient evidence, both literary and epigraphic. Often this is related to a positive effect, as in the case for an image of Apollo at Magnesia in Asia Minor, that was supposed to impart great strength upon its devotees. Other statues could have a negative physical effect on those who touched them, which, for example, was said of the sacred image of Artemis Orthia of Sparta, who drove those who touched it insane. Here you can see two archaic ivory representations of the goddess. Whether one of these or some other representations somehow reflect the original cult image, I have no idea. Perhaps somebody here could tell me more about this. Touching was therefore not completely harmless, but also not completely free and uncontrolled. Not all cult images would be available to be touched by the general public, and some had specific regulations attached to who might be allowed to come into any physical contact with the statue at all. Of course, there were also secular and practical reasons for at least the cleaning and possibly the clothing of cult statues. This could mean the need for the statue to be unadorned and touched, for the washing or oiling to be carried out. However, considering that as a privileged medium of epiphany, the cult images had to be ready to receive the deity, the periodical activities of cleaning and washing would have been often carried out ritually. The bathing of Venus was a well-known ritual at the Veneralia in Rome, and the rites of the Greek Aphrodisia festival included the processing of images in addition to their washing and adornment. In a 2nd century AD inscription from Olbia in southern Ukraine, the washing of the statue of Zeus Olbios is directly connected with the manifestation of divine power. If many people often touch the images of the gods to get protection and help, others could get into violent physical interaction with them. That mortals could harm the images of the gods was a grave cause of concern in the ancient world. A well-known desecration of statues took place in Athens in 415 BC. On the morning of 7 June, people of Athens awoke to find numerous hermai, or semi-iconic statues of the god Hermes, throughout the city, with their distinctive phalluses hacked off and their faces obliterated. Witnesses also spoke about other divine images being deliberately damaged by young men who were drunk. Cult images could be attacked in different ways and for a variety of reasons. Statues could be smashed to pieces because the god they represent does not appear to be answering prayers. as in the case of an image of Hermes, according to a fable of Babrios. They can be destroyed or pulled down because the gods they represent are no longer accepted to be gods, or perhaps are deemed to be unfriendly gods, which seems to have happened to some Egyptian deities at Rome. Sometimes the statue itself was not mutilated, but was treated badly, as in the story about some boys who created a mock hanging of the image of Artemis Condyleatis in Arcadia, saying in their jokes they would strangle the goddess, or when some urinated on statues in Rome. However, in such cases it is by no means always clear whether physical impact on image means physical impact on God. An interesting category of touch is related to the mobility of gods and their cult statues. Indeed, the possibility for cult statues to be mobile and the problems associated with this are made apparent by those images described as having been in some way bound or chained to prevent their movement. In particular, a variety of images of Eros can be found that portray the god chained to a tree or a column. Other depictions of Dionysos, Artemis, Hera, and Persephone are well known. There are also several stories about divine images having their wings clipped, if they had any. According to Pausanias, the clipping of wings of images and the binding of them are intended to achieve the same ends, that is, to prevent the departure of that god from the city. Apteros Nike, the wingless personification of victory, is the visual expression of this idea. Without her wings, the goddess of victory must stay in Athens. And several divine epithets were also created in the Hellenistic and imperial periods in order to indicate that a deity is, or is hoped to be, continually present in a place, like Archegetes, Poleos, Endemos, Polyarches, Polias, and so on and so forth. A similar motivation is suggested in the well-known narrative explaining the appearance of the Samian Hera, who, according to one story, was bound because the people of Samos believed the image had attempted to run away, rather than to prevent theft. In historical times, at an annual festival, the image was ceremonially bound before being carried down to the sea to be washed. Some such images have their binding implements incorporated into their depiction, rather than as separate entities, which particularly seems to be the case for various goddesses represented with garments binding their arms to their bodies. Artemis Kinduas from Caria, on whom neither rain nor snow ever falls, is a case in point. It's like she's wearing a straitjacket, which not only makes movement difficult, but may also prevent closer contact with humans. However, if not repeated or performed on prescribed occasions, binding images was not generally a ritual as such. It was probably often an action performed only once, at a time when circumstances seemed to require it. However, the more sophisticated worshippers may have often believed that a god's departure could not be prevented, and literary sources such as Pausanias or Plutarch would seem to suggest that one can't restrain the deity attached to the cult image if it wishes to depart, and one also may not move the cult statue if the god disapproves. Well, all the examples mentioned here inevitably bring us to a core question concerning any cult images. Is the god really there? This question was already asked in ancient times with some energy and consistency, and it still is. There were many different opinions and concepts about whether the cult image is the same as deity, or what their relationship was, or whether they had anything to do with each other directly. The sheer volume of evidence that we have for the roles of cult statues implies that not only were they a regular feature of religious life, but also had a position that needed careful consideration and negotiation. The idea that some devotees could linguistically categorize the image as equal to the deity, whilst others could not believe that the images even came close to representing the divine, is entirely appropriate to the multitude of religious options open to the citizens of the ancient world. The question of the god's presence is relevant in the sense that, in principle, the gods were not omnipresent. So one and the same god could not be in two or more places at the same time. On a practical level, however, it would be strange if gods with identical names were not also sometimes honored at the same time in different places. But if this was considered a problem worth pondering, it was for some writers, philosophers, antiquarians, or other intellectuals. For most worshippers, I think it would have been enough that they somehow perceived the presence of the divine. When needed, contact with the deity could also be made privately, for example, through a portable altar or statue. In some situations, however, the physical presence of the gods was thought to be urgently required. One of the healing miracles in Epidauros reports that Asclepius' sons had to perform surgery because the female patient failed to encounter the god in her sleep. Asclepius happened to be out of town. Uk epidamontos. So his sons cut the patient's head off and could not put it back. The patient was saved only when Asclepius returned and finished the job. Generally also because a god's presence and coming was not to be taken for granted, and gods did not continually inhabit their statues, but only visited them through epiphany, mortals tried to attract their attention, at least for the more official religious rituals. There was a wide range of methods to do this. Acclamations, songs, prayers, or visual signals such as bright clothes, crowns, animals with gilded horns, decorated altars, tables, and cleani. Gods also liked incense, wine, and thighs burning on the altar. On the other hand, anything that might hinder a god's epiphany was removed, such as various possible sources of pollution and discord. I'm coming to the conclusion now. When the Ephesians sent an embassy to Emperor Caracalla, Artemis, the ancestral goddess, was leading the embassy, as stated in a decree. And so Artemis, who was carried by the envoys, was thought to be present through her statue. Parallel evidence shows that traveling statues could continue to be worshipped despite being removed from their normal location. But does this mean that Artemis could not be approached in Ephesus for weeks or months? In such cases, certainly the more official ritual program of the sanctuary would have been affected, and the traditional epiphany through the cult image would not have been possible unless a second image or a copy was used. In fact, temples would have housed imitations of a central cult statue, much as those traveling with embassies or other tasks may have been replicas. However, even in the case that their images were temporarily absent, the gods must have been approachable, at least mentally, if only people somehow experienced their presence. I think one should admit that the absence of the image might still allow for the perception of the unseen involvement of the divine. Indeed, the reality of the unseen would have existed in all those places which an individual might think of as heralding the gods in some way. A similar cognitive leap on the part of the worshipper would have been required if he or she faced the question of divine omnipotence. Traditionally, as you know, the gods of the archaic and classical periods are not considered omnipotent due to the simple reason that, being marked by distinctive qualities and competencies, they command strictly divided departments. However, there is evidence that worshippers could regard their gods omnipotent whenever the contextual situation required it. Similarly, a physical contact with the cult image if a physical contact with the cult image was not possible for one reason or another, the devotee could still touch some objects within the sacred precinct and sense the presence of divinity and thereby perceive a connection with the divine. Ultimately, I think a lot, if not all, is about the personal experience of the worshipper. Thank you.
It has truly been such a pleasure to see so many of you attending our annual meeting here. And now we have seen, we have touched, maybe smelled, but it's time to taste as well. So we are very happy to welcome you to a reception which takes place at Kapodistrian, just around the corner, on the side of Academias. So you can just follow those who are leading the way. If you haven't been there, but you all are very warmly welcome. And thank you very much again.